Hey guys, and welcome back to the garage. Today we've got a special video. We're going to be doing a 1-year follow-on to the cab lights that I installed on the truck about 13 months ago, I think it is now. Want to dive into what it's been like living with them, how I've liked them, how they've worn, and also I want to take a deeper dive into the original install, answer maybe some more questions that I've seen come up from other guys since I've published the initial video. Go into a little bit more detail in some of the wiring, and also really walk you guys through some optional steps before the install that I think might benefit you guys down the road in the long run, depending on how you use your truck. So first off, before we dive any deeper into this, I do want to mention and thank today's sponsor, Recon. They will send you guys a cool shirt if you go online and buy one from them. They went ahead and sent me a second set of the Recon cab lights for the truck to go ahead and sort of do this video and for me to use these lights as a means for me to help you guys better install them, get as much understanding as you can about the install as possible. As part of this second round, I'm going to be creating a template full scale for my truck that you'll be able to get from Recon if you reach out to them. If you, at the end of this video, enjoy the video, like the lights, like everything about them, want to go ahead and purchase them, there's a discount coupon code below that I'll have listed there for you guys. You can go ahead and use that, get yourself a discount on these lights from their website, Recon. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead, pop these guys open, and see what comes in the box once you do get them from Recon. All right, this is the box that you'll get from Recon with the cab lights. Now I've got the 19 to 21, 2500, 3500 Ram heavy duty cab lights for the fresh install with the tinted lens. If you've already got cab lights from the factory, you'll want a non-fresh install. Lights are a little different. The hole from the factory is a square hole in the roof as opposed to the round one that we're going to be drilling later. So you're going to be wanting to make sure you order the correct lights. If you're doing the fresh install and you want the tinted lens, your part number is going to be 264345 WHBK. I'll also have a link to these guys in the description below. Now, once you open this up, you'll get a box that looks like this. It's got a magnetic lid. Pop it open. You've got gaskets here for the rear of the light. They will stick on like so. And then you've got the lens, the casing, and then you've got your plug. Now, that's pretty straightforward. We'll get into more detail about these guys in a minute. If you lift this out, you'll have a bag with some T-taps, the blue plastic things here, some screws, and some washers. Lastly, you'll have your wiring harness. It's not actually that bad of a wiring harness. Everything is sealed, wrapped up. I've seen harnesses from other accessory companies, I'm not going to name names, that just kind of let the wires dangle and leave it up to you to wrap it up if you want. Definitely fairly pleased with this. The connectors, I'll say they're decent. They're not going to be Herculean in their gripping power, but you don't really need them to be if you just make sure they're connected. They click into place and you leave them inside the cab. So decent wiring harness here. And then the T-taps, I can't speak for. When I install these in my truck, I chose to use some different ones that I had on hand that I liked better, simply because I had a good experience with them in the past. Not to say you can't use these, I'm sure they'd work fine. I'll run into sort of running the wiring harness in a few moments after I go through the review of my experience with the lights over the last year. Okay, so that's the lights that you'll get in a nutshell. Now you'll notice I've got a second box, and these are the lights that I first installed in my truck a year ago. Now if you're wondering why I took them off, it's because of the only issue I've had with them, and that's with moisture condensation getting in. I'll throw up a photo over me here. I noticed that it would seem to get in between the lens and the casing or the housing. And I think that might be down to how the lens is attached to the casing. Now that is the singular and only con that I've been able to find with these guys. The light output is fantastic. Despite the moisture that does get in there, the lights continue to work and maintain their output. They don't flicker. The color of the light is perfect. It matches the headlights great. The shape, I love of the overall light themselves. the shape of this profile. I love it sits perfectly on the roof. So it's been designed well from that standpoint, in that regard. The only problem I've seen is the way in which this lens here is mounted to this casing. Now it's got a screw that goes through the middle, which does mechanically bind it to the other, but there's no seal. And I know that because I went in and took these apart and popped the lenses off. And I'm gonna go through and recommend that you might do that as an optional step before installing. If you maybe go through high pressure car washes, or you have an area that you live in that's really, really raining, or you take your truck through an area that might be exposed to some sort of excessive inclement weather frequently, or if you just park it outside and it's got a lot of heat cycles that it might be subject to. So we're gonna go through and I'm gonna detail this sort of pre-install step, but I just chose to take these off and just kind of inspect them a little bit and really kind of see what I could see and what I could find, and see if there was a way to improve upon the light originally and how it's been put together. So we'll go ahead and bring you guys in and show you what I've done. Okay, so what I'm about to show you is, again, an entirely optional step. You can take these guys and mount them straight to your roof. It is fine to do that. I've found that after, for me, it was about 12 months of, driving in the snow, parking outside, going through car washes, that type of thing. About 2 of the 5 had some issues with condensation, and I found this was, the best way for me to deal with it. So if you want, you can do what I'm about to do. Otherwise, if you're thinking, I've parked my truck in the garage all year, then feel free to skip this step. And I will go ahead and throw on screen the part in the video where you can skip to go straight into the install. But if you're like me and you're kind of your truck is kind of exposed to the elements a little bit, use a non-marring pry bar. Now, to get the lens off, it is, once you've, there's no screw in here obviously right now. It is only held in place with glue, and to get it off, you take your sort of thinnest non-marring pry bar and push directly down against this lens housing, like that. Do not, resist the temptation to pry up. That will potentially chip this outside edge. So if you just slowly push in and work your way around, and it is going to be tough, you'll certainly potentially always have the risk of cracking something. So if you're not comfortable doing that, then also skip this step. Again, it's completely optional. But once you do work your way all the way around, you'll be able to hear the glue releasing as well. Once you've worked your way all the way around, you'll be able to pop it off. The glue itself is more of a cyanoacrylate or super glue type attachment or adhesive. So it does not have a sealing, a large sealing property, but it does have a very strong bonding property. So it works very well until it wears through, and whether it causes that to wear through could be high pressure water, it could be heat cycles, etc. So for me, it worked very well for about 12 months, but it really does depend on how you use the truck. So again, completely optional. But we're going to take this lens off. You'll notice this is a purely LED setup. The lights, very well sealed here. There is a bit of sort of rubber sealant there. Make sure that is intact. If it's pulling up from the base plate, you can also throw in some sealant there. Now, what I'm going to use, and what I used on a test light, which is this one, I've already done this, is some silicone RTV. That's just room temperature vulcanizing silicone. It's a very good sealant. It's flexible. When you're driving down the road, bumps of the road won't affect it. Again, it's going to be put in this channel, and that channel is fairly wide. It's fairly easy to apply the silicone into. You can use many different brands out there. I just grabbed some Permatex, got it off Amazon. I'll throw a link in the description if you're interested. RTV, it comes with, these things come with these applicators that allow you to get down in here. So just put a thick bead all the way around. You don't have to be super conservative with it. I didn't have any issues with squeeze out. Here's the one I did a thick bead all the way around. If at the right angle in the sun, I think right about there, right here, You can kind of see a little bit of it, but it is very, very hidden. Anyway, I just put a thick bead, drop the lens back on, like so, and then clamped it for 24 hours because that is the cure time on this. I just used a spring clamp from the workbench, and that's all there was to it. So I'm gonna go ahead, illustrate taking one of these lens caps off, putting the silicone RTV on, and then you know, speed through the other 5. Once I got those done, we'll go ahead and get started on the rest of the install. Okay, so I wanted to just kind of run through what I do to take the lens off and then speed through it. I use my non-marring pry bar with the elbow, and I start from the back edge. It's the thickest area where the plastic is thickest. I push sort of towards the plastic and then pry up a little bit, and then you'll hear the glue letting go right there. Now that is, I'm being fairly gentle with this. Again, I don't want to crack the plastic. You don't want to be wrenching on it. Again, patience is your friend with this. You want to work your way around slowly. Right where you have this area here, this thicker side of my pry bar fits. Towards the sides and the front, I need to use the thinner end. And again, just push in until I hear all the glue let go and the lens comes off. If you go too quickly or you pull too hard, you run the risk of cracking something. So again, that's a risk you'll have to take if you want to do this step. Recon does sell these lights individually. I think they're 50 bucks on the website. So if you do happen to mess up, you don't have to buy a whole new set. But again, that's only if you're going to do this step. So I'm going to go ahead, work my way around, and then once I've got that done, I'll speed through the rest of them. Okay, so that's this one off. They do vary, you know, some are easier than others. This one took about maybe 7-8 minutes for me, real time. Starting in the back is easiest, again, because the plastic is thickest on this ridge here. Lifting it up, the gap here in the front, very thin. The ridge is basically non-existent, so working underneath that is very difficult without damaging this. So I always start in the back, work my way around. If I need to, I just kind of, with my hands or with the pry bar, flex this a few times to try and weaken this bond, and this usually comes off without issue. So as you see here, you got a little cyanoacrylate type glue residue on this and on the casing and the lens here. Clean that up with some alcohol later before we drop the silicone RTV in there. But I'm going to go ahead, finish doing these guys off camera. Again, optional step, but if you, like me, park outside in the hot sun, drive through the snow, you know, go through high pressure car washes, this might be something you want to consider. Okay, I've got all the lights de-lensed, if you will. I'm just going to take a Q-tip, dip it into some alcohol, and run it across the edge here to clean this up. Do that for the lens, do that for the casing or the housing. Just get it in there, into this channel. And once you've got that kind of cleaned up, set that aside to dry. Do the other 6, and then we can proceed to sealing it. If you've got a lot of alcohol kind of hanging out in there now, you can just run through with a paper towel or a dry Q-tip. Okay guys, we are ready to finish the last step here on sealing this. Get your silicone RTV, cut the smallest hole that you can in the feeder, bring the silicone through to the end of the nozzle, and set this so that the protective wrapping is peeled back a bit so you don't get any silicone on it later. Set that aside. First thing we're going to do is go in here, Some of the sort of gloss black gasket material I've found sometimes will pop off of here. I don't know if you can see that there's a bit of a, doesn't hold very well sometimes. If you're worried about that, I'm not worried about it because this has foam gasket material. And when I install this on the truck, I'm going to be on the outside of this putting in quite a lot of any sort of more silicone RTV on the roof of the truck. But for testing purposes, from my perspective, I want to see, okay, will this hold up? I'm going to test this outside before mounting on the truck, and I want this to be sealed. So I'm going to put some silicone here underneath the light and then all the way around. So I've got it underneath here. Don't be stingy. Won't harm anything. So now I'm going to go ahead and put it all the way around. Nice bead. Now the last spot that you want to get is in this middle here where the screw will go through. The casing has a nice flat plastic surface to mate up against it, so it will bond nicely if you put a little extra silicone here as well. And don't worry if you clog up the hole. You can always run a drill bit through that hole later. It's always better to be more sealed than less. And carefully just drop this right on top. Lay it down, push it in place. Now, you'll notice here, because the channel is so deep, even though we laid such a thick bead, there's zero squeeze out. So again, don't worry about squeeze out, don't worry about masking tape. Take whatever clamp you're using. I'm using a spring clamp. I don't know what the spring force is, but it hurts, so it's enough, and it's not too much where it's going to crack it. So once you've got it in place, set it down, let it just sit there undisturbed for the next 24 hours, and when you come back, it will be very much secured and sealed in place. So I'm going to do the other 4. Once I've got these guys done, I'm gonna go and hop into the truck and run you through how to set up the wiring harness. What's up, guys? It is the next morning. These lights have all dried overnight. Before we put these on the roof, I'll walk you through how to pop some of the trim pieces off, and then if you want to see excruciating detail on how to remove all of the interior trim, I will put a link up here in the corner to the first install video I did where I walked you through step by step how to remove every bolt. I'm not gonna do that in this one simply because I've already done it, but I will show you how to pop off some of the more sort of anterior pieces and where to start running the wiring harness. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, the first step to sort of working and running the wiring harness will be to remove this side trim panel, and this is one of the easiest panels to pop off in the vehicle. Start down below here, wedge in your non-wiring pry bar, work your way up and twist. As you do, you'll get closer to the clips, and as you twist, it will pop out like so. At that point, you've got your panel backed out. That is now only held in place by the sort of rubber door trim, door seal. And you can work it out like so, and put that on the ground. Just to see the wiring and where I've tapped into it. This harness here is what you'll be connecting to. Now, when you first pop this off, this harness will be attached to this harness. This big sort of harness here that I'm tapping on will be affixed to this clip. It's a lot easier if you pull it off, disconnect it. I am connected. So here's, you see one T-tap and then another cable behind it. This is the black and red wire, and this is the red wire. So for me, I've got the black and red. This is the ground wire and the wiring harness. I'm not sure if I said it already. This is the wiring harness that comes with the cab lights from Recon. It runs, I run it all the way up behind this sort of dash piece, and then into the A-pillar. We'll get to that in a minute. But I've just run it down through, zip tied it along some factory harness, existing factory harnesses, pulled back the existing factory loom cover, and decided to do a fixed ground, the black and red wire, using one of the T-taps I like here. So there's ground, and then on the other side of this connector, you can, if you want, remove the glove box to get to it. This is the glove box. It comes out in a fairly straightforward fashion. You simply pull this guy towards you, and it will pop out. You pull it this way, that way. If you, again, more detail on the glove box removal, check out the first video. I'll put a card up in the corner. You pop out the glove box, you'll be able to far more easily reach the white wire, and there you can see the T-tap connecting to it. I believe it's like a white and green wire. So as far as detail on this round goes, I just wanted to pop this off, show you guys where everything will go. But in terms of removing the glove box, again, take a look at the first video. To remove the A-pillar, I've got, again, more detail there in the first install, but you'll just reach around here on the tabs with the non-marring pry bar, pry these guys loose. They come out very, very easily. You don't need a lot of force. I don't know if you can see in there, there's a, there we go. There's a 10mm bolt there and an identical bolt down here. You pop those out, and then once the bolts are removed, pull this towards you. Now, before you do any of this sort of removal, I do want to say disconnect both batteries. Anytime you're working with an area where an airbag is, you don't want to take any chances and potentially knock it when you're pulling this off and risk the bag blowing on you. So with that in mind, disconnect the batteries first, give them some time to discharge, open the doors a few times to potentially drain any remaining voltage left in the system. So with that in mind, once the A-pillar has been removed, you will then have access to run the wiring harness along this A-pillar and up into the headliner. Now, to run the wiring harness through the headliner, again, if you want the full detail, take a look at the initial video. I'll have a card up in the corner. But it's not that difficult. There's a few bolts you need to back out here, and a screw that needs backing out here. It's I think it's an Allen head key there. Once you got these removed, this will be loose and can pop down. There is a couple of bolts up there. Back those out. That will disconnect this whole area of headliner from the cab roof. I don't believe you actually need to pop this off the headliner. The first time I installed this, I went ahead and pulled this out. I don't believe you need to do that. And then you've got to disconnect that visor over there in the exact same fashion as you would this one. Once you've done that, you'll have access enough to just kind of feed the harness through. Now, when I did the install the first time, one of the ways I went about it was sticking the harness wire in and trying to get that harness wire out through the hole in the roof, which is quite difficult. So I ended up snaking the wire from the cab light into the roof and then trying to connect them by sneaking my hands through and connecting them. And that can be done for a few of these, like in this area, you can kind of meet the wires together and connect them. I found since then a far easier method of doing this, and that is it also prevents you, or it allows you to not have to drop this headliner down as far. You don't have to worry about removing any of the B-pillar stuff or even kinking the headliner here if you choose not to do this. The way I recommend to do this or approach this is to not, mess about with the B-pillar. Just back this down enough to snake the harness through all the way along. And then the areas where the cab light harnesses sort of shoot off, leave them hanging down in front of the windshield. Come up to the roof here, and these are my cab light harnesses. They've already been snaked up through, but assuming you haven't done that, get something like a stiff sort of rod, maybe not quite metal, but something that's got a little bit of rigidity to it. Drop it down through this 1/2-inch hole that you've drilled. I will talk about these next. Drop it down, run it forward towards the windshield. You'll then see it drop out here. You can then take the harness for the cab light and just tape it to that stiff rod and pull it all the way through, and it will come right out this hole. You tape it in place and you'll be ready to attach your cab lights later. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about drilling these holes. All right, I wanted to sort of focus on and review the drilling of these holes. When you go to do this, if you want to see, again, a very sort of in-depth guide, take a look at the first video I did on this. It'll walk you through everything. In terms of, the process, things that I've kind of dialed in, I would say use a punch when you go to start these holes, just to keep the bits from walking, and use a pilot bit or several pilot bits. In terms of where you want to line these holes up, I went ahead this morning and made a template that I've sent off to Go Recon, so that you don't have to spend 4 hours climbing around on your roof trying to line these up and measuring and making sure you've got them in the right spot. So if you want it, go ahead and contact Go Recon. Either they'll, I'm not sure how they're going to do it, they'll either send it to you or they'll just start including them in the kits for the truck. Either way, that should be available to you guys pretty soon after this video. Now, when you're going to start these holes, again, get a tap of some kind, not a tap, a punch of some kind, just to indent the sheet metal there. And then for me, the pilot bit that I started with was this one, the 5/64. There we go, 5/64. And then, I ended up starting all 3 holes with the 5/64. And then, there we go. Going up to this one, this is the 7/64 bit. Now that is fairly crucial for these 2 holes, is that you keep that at 7/64. The reason being is the screws that Go Recon sends out with these cab lights are such that the shank is 7/64, and the sort of the spiral wrapped around it is big enough where they bite into the roof like this. If you go bigger, you're going to need to rivet in some kind of anchor, which is another step in the install, which I don't think you really need. You can see I've got all of them taped in place all the way down, ready to put the new lights on that they've sent out to me, which I've resealed and gotten sort of ready to go. Now, the other tip when it comes to drilling these guys is the middle hole here has to be a 1/2 inch to get or allow for this harness to come through, or that clip rather. And I found this type of a bit works best. I call them Christmas tree bits, just because they look like this. The flatter, the better, I guess. The shorter and fatter they are, the longer and skinnier they are, the greater the likelihood that it's going to have to plunge deeper inside the cab and potentially contact the headliner just beneath there. So the shorter and fatter the bit, the better. And then once you've got that drilled, if you want, you can come through. I'll say it's if you want. You can come through and add some touch-up paint to the edge of the steel there. The reason I'm saying it's kind of if you want now, as opposed to what I did the first time I installed this, where I put it on every hole, you're going to come through and fill this up with silicone and seal it off that way. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next step here, and that's to get all these lights installed. Okay, now the final step before we go to install the lights on the roof is to put these sort of back end gaskets on. So you want to just peel these, peel this off and apply it almost like you would a sticker. However, you do want to ensure you line this up perfectly so that the hole here on the gasket aligns with the hole on the casing, right on the light, I guess. And then check on the back end that your gasket isn't sticking out. Once you've done that, press it down. That will ensure a nice fit. So do that for all 5. Once you've done that, we can take the, you can take your box of lights out to the truck along with some silicone RTV and your applicator. I will meet up with you on the roof of the truck once I've got all 5 of these here put on. Okay guys, I've got the lights up here. Go ahead and get started with the install. Take off the protective cover for the lens. Okay, so we've got the screw in the washer. Go ahead and put that through. So having put the screw through the hole in the cab light, just enough to have it poke through, this will help in assisting with the alignment of the cab light into the holes that we've drilled into the cab, just like so. So the next step will be to obviously put silicone rubber around each of these holes. I think the first thing I'm going to do before I proceed though is clip these connectors together. So when we do take the tape off, if this drops into the cab, I don't have to try fishing it out. Expertly catalog this in the cab. So do not be frugal here with your application of the silicone. Get it all around and probably on top of the hole, like so. Really, we just want to prevent any kind of leaks inside the cab, as well as water seeping underneath and up through the gasket or into any potential areas under this light that aren't waterproof. So get all around this hole. Again, don't be stingy. Okay, once you've got your sealed light attached and then all of these holes thoroughly covered in silicone, you can go ahead and carefully drop the harness back into the cab and send the rest of the wire into the cab as well. At this point, it helps to get down a little bit and lower yourself in line with these holes and line them up so that the screws drop into the holes like so. And slowly turn these screws. Now screw them down, kind of alternating between back and front as you apply pressure. You don't want to ratchet one side down and then go to the other. You want to screw them down evenly. There we go. You know, if from my perspective, and having done this a few times, if you're turning the wrench sideways and cranking on it, that's probably too much force. You should be able to keep it vertical and just keep your eye on it, and that should have the cab light expertly installed. Okay, so you can see this back hole. There's a screw here, but if water fills this hole and sits in it, not too much can go wrong with this light. Water will sit in this area, potentially pooling and slowly leaking over time into the cab. Shouldn't have that issue since we put so much silicone underneath. But what we're going to do is to prevent the screw from rusting and just having water pool in there, we're going to fill this up with some more silicone. So take your time with that. It will sort of over time flatten itself out. As gravity begins to pull it back down. So I'm going to go ahead and do the front screw as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put a bunch of silicone in here as well. It will prevent water from pooling, and should it pool here, the potential for it to leak into the lens is much higher. So if you're only going to put silicone in one of these holes, put it in the front one. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up with a paper towel and get the other 4 lights installed. Once I've got those installed, I'll come back and we can review the final result. All right, guys, I've got all 5 of these installed, sealed off, and ready to go. So I'll go ahead and step back, show you what they look like now, and come back out at night and see what they look like when they're all lit up. All right, guys, that is the install of the Go Recon cab lights. Sort of redone, and again, I am still incredibly happy with these things and the way they've turned out. If you want to get yourself a pair of these or a set of these, check out the website Go Recon, and then use the discount code that I've got down below in the description. If you enjoyed the video, thought it was helpful, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.